Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for June 11th, 2018. On today's episode, we're going to talk about some breaking DC movie news and discuss what we've been doing in the water cooler. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Scirettais, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Weekend Editor Brad Omanand.
Hey, that's me.
writersHoai-Tran Bui.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelistatotalk.
Hi.
Okay, before we get into the Water Cooler Monday, let's talk about some breaking DC news, and that is that Geoff Johns is being replaced by Jim Lee as the Chief Creative Officer of DC Entertainment. Jacob, you wrote some of this news up for the site. What do we know?
All we know is that Geoff Johns, who was kind of being positioned by Warner Brothers, almost as their Kevin Feige-esque figure, the creative mind of the DC movies, is stepping down as president and chief creative officer of DC Entertainment. And it's not like he's being fired into oblivion. He is starting his own production company called Mad Ghost Productions, but definitely feels like a changing of the guard, because he's been sort of the creative face of DC Entertainment since 2010. And I feel like a lot of people, myself included, thought we'd be seeing him overseeing a big DC movie universe, and that just didn't happen. And Jim Lee replacing him is interesting. Jim Lee is a superstar artist. If you were reading comics in the 90s, you know Jim Lee's work really, really well, and he's still working today. But like Geoff Johns, he became so influential as a creative that he became an executive. So him taking over is interesting. I'm curious to see if he can succeed where Geoff Johns did not. And there's some rumors and scuttlebutt going around the internet about how unhappy Warner Brothers was with Geoff Johns' approach to the DC movies. That's Kyle Buchanan from Vulture reporting that. But I guess I don't want to dwell on the tabloidy stuff like that, because I think that the real story here, I think people really want to hear about, is that Mad Ghost Productions, Johns' new company that has a deal with Warner Brothers, is going to prioritize the Green Lantern Corps movie, which was announced at Comic-Con in 2015 and has been sitting on a 2020 release date for years now. And Johns will produce and write Green Lantern Corps. And this is exciting news if you're a comic book fan, because Johns wrote Green Lantern for 9 years, and it is the definitive Green Lantern run. I mean, if you go back over the decades and 50 years of Green Lantern stories, you're not going to find another writer who knows this world, this corner of the DC universe as well. Someone who's told so many stories this long. Geoff Johns is the definitive Green Lantern writer, and even though he was a co-producer on the abysmal 2011 Green Lantern movie, he really didn't have much of a say in that movie on a much larger level than just maybe being a voice in the background. So him stepping away from being executive and saying, I'm going to spearhead this Green Lantern movie, is actually genuinely thrilling, because there's, on the page, Geoff Johns' Green Lantern reads like Star Wars in the DC universe. It has that kind of scope. And if they can make that happen, I think we're in for something really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the cynical side of me says that, Johns was pushed out, and this producing gig is to, soften the blow. It's kind of like how Hollywood kind of handles these things. But you know what, Johns, when he was announced for this position, I never, as much as I like Johns in the comics, I never thought he was going to be great for this job, because he's a creative, and these corporate management positions and creative positions require very different skills and talents. And I think Geoff Johns will be better suited in a more creative producing realm. I'm excited to see what he does with the DC universe.
I do too. I think this is a good choice. I mean, I don't think anybody's happy with the DC movies at this point. After Justice League, everybody feels burned by it. So I think just having a fresh start and letting Geoff Johns do what he does best is probably the right choice.
Yes. Okay, let's move on to the water cooler. Everybody join me over in the corner by the virtual water cooler, and we can talk about what we've been up to. I'll start things off. This past week, I was lucky to see Piff the Magic Dragon perform at the Magic Castle. For those of you who don't know Piff from his appearances on Fool Us or America's Got Talent, it's a magician who dresses in a dragon suit. He is a comedy magician. He is hilarious. His I've seen a lot of his TV work, but this is the first time that I got to see him in person. And he has this dog, Mr. Piffles, which is a Chihuahua that he also dresses up as a dragon. And his act live in person is a lot more edgy than the stuff we've seen from him on network television and cable television. For example, the show leads up to the end finale is Mr. Piffles doing the bullet catch. So they select someone out of the audience to hold a gun up to this dog and for Mr. Piffles to catch the bullet in his mouth, which is I saw people squirming in their chairs. It was hilarious. It was great to see him finally in person perform. Next time in Vegas, he from time to time has a show there. I'm hoping to catch the whole thing because the Magic Castle thing was just like a 40-minute show, and I think he has a bigger show in Vegas. Moving on from dogs to cats, Jacob, what have you been up to this weekend?
I've been up to my knees in cat poop because I adopted a new cat. We're not sure how old he is. He's very small, so we think he's under a year. So maybe he's a kitten, maybe not quite, but he's on that cusp. His name is Fitzgerald J. Catsby, or we call him Fitz around the house. And we adopted him because a friend of a family friend who has a ranch out in the countryside, somebody abandoned Fitz on her property. He's this little Siamese kitten, and the owner of the ranch said, I'll keep him as a barn cat. I'll live in the barn and hunt rats with my other cats. And she put him in the barn, and he started getting thinner and thinner because she realized that he didn't like hunting. He didn't like doing anything except trying to get into the house and the doors open and trying to relax inside the house. So realizing that he was not cut out to be a barn cat, she reached out to some friends. We got in contact with us. We already have a Siamese cat named Fred, who you occasionally hear on this show in the background. And we decided that, I don't know how people listen to this own cats, but when you buy a second dog or adopt a second dog, you're getting a second dog. You're dealing with two dogs, but a second cat is like having 1.5 cats. It doesn't stack quite the same way. It's much easier to take care of two cats. So we decided we'll add another animal to the menagerie, and we went and picked him up. We brought him home, and he's very thin. He's recovering from being neutered and from he had mites and fleas there, so he has like little scabs from those, but he's currently free of those. But he's very sweet. He's already shown the dogs who's boss. Fred, the older Siamese cat, who's about 8, does not like Fitz yet. He hisses whenever he walks by, but we're working on it. They're going to like each other and be best friends in a few weeks. That's the plan, at least.
Every time I see a picture of a Siamese cat, I always think of that song from Lady and the Tramp, the Siamese cat song. Which
I hate that song.
You hate that song? I mean, is that song racist at this point?
Well, it is racist, but also it just really traumatized me as a kid because I really hate seeing characters being unfairly sort of like blamed or framed, and that song just like, I don't know, really rubs me the wrong way. So I can never like a Siamese cat because of that.
Brad, what have you been up to?
Not really anything all that exciting.
Okay, moving on.
Although I'm sure Fitz is lovely, Jacob.
No, the thing I've realized over the past few months, I think I'm a dog person. After years thinking I was a cat person, my dogs, Jack and Carl, made me realize how much I like dogs and how much I enjoy their company and how much I like their personalities. But the only cats I've ever encountered who match dogs for me are Siamese cats. They're noisy. They have so much personality. They want attention. They want love. A Siamese cat is as interested in you as a dog is. And after years of being around cats who are sort of distant and like want to be on their own until they want food, which is, I guess, part of the joy of a cat, I found myself falling in love with how Siameses are cats who want to please and want to be pleased, and they will make themselves known at all times in ways that I find hilarious and cute.
I actually grew up with Siamese cats. We had 2 when pretty much my entire time that I lived at my parents' house before I went to college. And they were awesome. And yeah, they're definitely cats that have personalities.
Brad, what have you been up to?
I have been doing vaguely interesting things, I guess. So the one thing that I did was I've been reorganizing my office.
Brad, I don't think reorganizing your office is interesting.
Well, it might not be to you, but for me, I like moving my stuff around. No, I've had a treadmill for a while, but I haven't really liked where it's been, and so I finally decided to move it into my office and kind of reorganize things. And just so that required me moving around shelves and figuring out a new space for my desk, just so I can maximize the space and have enough room for it. And so it's required me moving stuff and reorganizing things on shelves so that they look aesthetically pleasing, since I have a bunch of, Ghostbusters and Star Wars and other collectibles that are on display. And so I actually always kind of have had fun figuring out the best way to display those kinds of things. So as much as I hate moving furniture and stuff like that, I don't mind the reorganizing of items on shelves. It's kind of I don't know, I guess a little therapeutic, I guess you could say.
For sure.
And then I was also really happy that last week I was able to get my hands on NECA's new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie action figures. These are 7-inch action figures that look exactly like the Ninja Turtles from the original movie from 1990. The closest they ever came to making action figures look like these was around the time that the third Ninja Turtles movie came out, and they made these movie-style action figures that were kind of on the same quality of their normal Ninja Turtles line, but they were less cartoonish. But because the turtles started to get a little bit more detail on their skin as the movies went on, little reptile splotches and stuff, the figures also had those things, but it made them look like they had some kind of weird illness, even though they were trying to make them look more realistic. But these just look fantastic. They're Comic-Con exclusives, but NECA did 3 days last week where they had a very limited select amount available for pre-order if you were fast enough and online at the right time. And so I was able to get one on the third day, and I'm so excited to finally get it once it ships after Comic-Con's over.
Very cool. I can't wait to just check these out in person at Comic-Con, which is coming up at a speeding pace at this point. HT, you've been reading over the weekend?
Yeah, I kind of accidentally fell into a long reading binge, and it was because last week I wrote up some casting news about his Dark Materials, the BBC adaptation of the Philip Pullman trilogy, and this was one of my favorite series as a kid. And while I was writing it up, I got really excited, and I was like, okay, I'm going to pull out my old Golden Compass book and maybe just skim it over a little bit, get a refresher. And then I accidentally started reading the whole thing, and before I knew it, it was 3 a.m. and I was halfway through The Subtle Knife, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is what I'm doing this weekend. So it was really fun to reread the trilogy, just because this was actually a fun little tradition that I used to do when I was a kid, is that I first read the trilogy when I was in about 5th or 6th grade. I think it was 5th grade. And the series goes through some pretty heady subject matter, things like human consciousness and dark matter and alternate universes and original sin. And so a lot of those concepts kind of went over my head when I first read it, and I didn't understand it at all. So I decided to reread the whole thing again next year, and I reread it again the year after that and the year after that, and it became sort of a fun little tradition for me to do that every year. I think I kept it up for a good 5 years. And I hadn't reread it since high school, I think, and rereading all of it again was just a little fun jaunt down memory lane, and seeing if the series held up as it did when I was a kid, and it really does. It's really well written, and has, even though sometimes the sci-fi concepts clash a little bit with the religious metaphors that Philip Pullman is going for, because the series is an inversion of Paradise Lost, and he has a lot of ambitious sort of subjects going on in there that don't really sometimes jibe through, but it's a really great series that I felt a nice sort of warm rush going through again and having that old book smell. So I finished rereading all of those books over the weekend, and kind of just stayed inside the entire time rereading them. And they're 400, 500 pages each. So it was kind of a long accidental reread, but I'm really happy that I did that. And coincidentally, I also went to Barnes & Noble and picked up Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, which is not related to his Dark Materials, but has sort of somewhat similar plot. It was a book that I kind of started reading when I was just hanging out in Barnes & Noble one day, and it's about an old like a college professor who essentially ends up in an alternate timeline where he had chosen a different path and was working on some different huge project that was top secret, and is trying to get back to the world where he came from. So I picked it up at the Barnes & Noble because I was reading it a little bit there and was really interested, and happened to just be by Barnes & Noble again after I finished his Dark Materials and pick it up, and so I'm now reading that.
Yeah, it's currently being adapted into a movie. Roland Emmerich announced, it? Yeah, 2016. I'm looking at the article on /film.com. Roland Emmerich, the director of Independence Day, has plans to make it. We haven't heard anything since then, but that was what was announced.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting so far.
I don't think I've ever fallen into reading an entire book over the weekend, never mind a trilogy of books. That is pretty insane. But let's move on to what we've been watching. Last week, I got to watch both Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom and The Incredibles 2 in one single day. I talked about that previously because we did early buzz discussions last week on the podcast, so I'm not going to reiterate what I said there. But I will say, after being given a week, I am kind of itching to revisit Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. I wasn't so hot on it the first time I saw it, but it's sticking with me, and I want to give it a second shot. I did get to interview both the directors, Brad Bird and J.A. Bayona, last week as well, and I thought I would give you a peek inside the glamorous world of movie junkets. I interviewed Brad Bird at the beginning of the day, and usually when we go into these interviews, we're trying to ask questions that are not the usual questions, so that, when you read the interview on /film.com, you aren't reading the same, answers that you get on, every other movie website. Why did you want to do this movie? Whatever. So we usually try to come up with some creative questions, and this time we got some great answers. You'll be able to read the interview on the site later this week, but it's interesting because usually I get to do the interviews at the end of the day. This time it was at the beginning of the day before they do this big press conference where all the outlets, including outlets that didn't get one-on-one interviews, come into a press conference-like area, probably like 100 people, and they get to ask, the cast and crew questions about the movie. And it was interesting because two of my big questions were asked during the press conference, and the answers were, almost verbatim what was in my interview. So it's kind of like, you're going to read the same content elsewhere, but from a press conference now, which is just part of the job. That's just how it goes sometimes. But anyways, you'll be able to read it later this week. There's some interesting stuff there. And I did ask Brad Bird how he felt about Iron Giant being used as a weapon in Ready Player One. So you can hear his answer to that and much more in the interview. And lastly, what I've been watching, I finally caught up to the last 3 episodes of Westworld. As you know, previously on this podcast, I've been saying that this season of Westworld has not been exciting me as much as the first season. And Kitcher's been out of town taking care of her sick mother, so I've been putting off watching the show, maybe because of that, but also because I haven't been super excited to watch it. And I caught up this season. I can agree with Chris, who I think earlier said that it's a much easier to binge watch them than it is to watch it week to week this season. Where the first season, I loved the process of seeing seeing an episode and having the water cooler discussion week to week and theories. So I did get more out of these episodes, seeing them back to back. But I do want to put some love towards last night's episode, which was probably the best episode of this season. It's so good, emotional, so well written. I anybody who's given up on the series at this point, this season, because I know the season's been testing people, I would say, stick with it and just to get to this episode because it was just so great. Did anybody else here watch last night's episode of Westworld?
Well, no, Chris did because I.
Yeah. Yes, I did. I agree. It is the best episode of this season and maybe just the show in general. But I have like a nitpick with it in that it's an anomaly. Like this episode is so good because it does something completely different, and next week the show's going to be back on its bullshit, so to speak. So as much as I loved it, it kind of bothered me because I was like, oh, this is great. Why can't the show be this instead of what it's turning into? So I agree that it was fantastic, but it comes with that caveat that, they're going to have to go back to the story they were already telling that's just not as interesting as this was.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. I do like how it kind of it filled in some gaps of some stuff that were hanging threads from season 1, and it was just its own emotional, almost like a bottle episode. But yeah, it was great. Brad, you finally got to see Incredibles 2.
I did. Last week, Chicago had their press screening, and this was cool because this doesn't always happen, but they were able to accommodate guests for this one, and I was able to actually bring my whole family. So my parents and my teenage sister accompanied me, and so we got to see it as a family, watching a superhero family, which was really fun. Everybody enjoyed the hell out of it. Everyone in my family thinks that it's just as good as the first one, which I would definitely agree with. I don't think it's better than the first one, but I think it's right on par with the first one, which Peter obviously disagrees with and has some wrong opinions about. But yeah, it was really fun. I always like when I get the opportunity to let my family get in on the perks of this job, especially since the last time they were able to get in on the perks of the job, we went to the world premiere of Transformers the last night, which was fun because it was a world premiere, but also not fun because it was a Transformers movie. So that was just a cool thing that I was able to do with them.
What did you think of the movie?
Oh, I think Incredibles 2 is fantastic. Like I said, I think it's just as good as the first one. Jack. Yeah, no, I'm not though. I'm completely right. Jack is definitely a scene stealer. Peter, you mentioned, I think, on Twitter that you would like to see a short with Edna babysitting Jack, just like there was a short with the babysitter and Jack from the first one, and I wholeheartedly agree. I want to see what those two did while they were hanging out because that dynamic is hilarious when you see it happen. But yeah, I think that it's fantastic. The action sequences in this movie are just as good as any normal superhero movie. It's still got a lot of heart to it. It's hilarious. And yeah, everyone's gonna love it when it comes out this weekend for sure. I saw Ocean's 8 this weekend, which was enjoyable, but not nearly as good as I hoped it would be. I just kind of hoped it would pop a little bit more. I wanted the characters to be as defined and memorable as the characters from the original Ocean's trilogy. It didn't really feel like they had much beyond their own signature style visually. Like their characterization just didn't feel like it was as richly drawn as the other Ocean's movies, and everything kind of just felt too easy. And you could argue that it's because they're good at their job, but like you could see that they tried to introduce conflicts throughout the heist, but it was never anything where you felt like you were watching them like go with the flow and try and figure out how to solve a problem in the way where the Ocean movies kind of made you think things were going wrong and then pulled the rug out from under you and be like, oh no, this is part of the plan. And there was never really a lot of that here that left you wondering what was happening. Everything just kind of goes off mostly without a hitch, and there's not really anything exciting about it, Like there's a distinct lack of conflict in the heist, and not I don't mean that as far as among the characters, like having conflict or arguing or having bickering or things like that. I just mean the heist itself and trying to pull it off. And honestly, the chemistry between everybody, I didn't think like sizzled as much as the chemistry with the Ocean's 11 cast. Like it just felt like they worked well together, but not in a way that made me feel like this was a great team or anything like that. So I don't know. It's definitely enjoyable, but not something that I was over the moon for or anything like that.
You know, this is interesting. I haven't seen this movie yet, but half the people I know have your response, and then half the other people I know like really liked it. Like, and it's I don't know. It's a very weird, divisive film. It seems. So I'm interested to check it out. What else have you been watching, Brad?
And then I got around recently to watching the Meyerowitz stories, New and Selected, on Netflix. It's been around for a while, but I've never taken the time to watch it. It's a Noah Baumbach movie starring Adam Sandler, Ben Stiller, Dustin Hoffman, Emma Thompson. And it's good for the most part. The first hour and a half I really enjoyed, and then it feels like it kind of loses focus and gets a little disjointed in the last 20, 25 minutes, like almost like he didn't really know how to wrap up the story very well. But the characters are very well crafted. Noah Baumbach has this great knack for creating flawed, dysfunctional families and making characters that are despicable, really, without making you entirely loathe them, even though they're definitely not great people. So, and the performances are great. It's easily one of the best things Adam Sandler has done in the past 15 to 20 years, probably. So yeah, it's definitely, I think it's worth checking out just to see the performances, but the movie as a whole didn't entirely come together for me.
And Jacob has been busy going to movies with low cinema scores.
I've been going to movies that are the best movies of 2018. Specifically, I saw Hereditary again, and I've talked about this movie before, and I've written about it before. It is my favorite horror movie in a long time, and it is currently my favorite film of the year, edging out Annihilation. Seeing it again with a crowd was amazing. There's one shot here. I'm not going to spoil it, but both times I saw the movie, the audience was not sure what they were looking at, and then you notice in waves, different pockets of the theater would notice what they're looking at and start like screaming or gasping all at different moments as the shot lingered on this thing. And it's being in the crowd when this happened twice was just remarkable. The command on display, the craft on display, even if you don't like the movie, if it doesn't work for you as a experience, director Ari Aster, he's the real deal. His command of tone and of menace and dread here is unreal, and I just can't get shots of this movie out of my head. It is nasty and in your face while also being sort of sober and funny and grim in ways that are both playful and like deadly serious. It just, watching it again and seeing all the different pieces come together was such a satisfying experience. And the cinema score is terrible because it's a feel bad horror movie, but it's kind of feel bad that's so designed to be punishing and so designed to be feel bad that it's actually fun. It doesn't leave you feeling like your life's ruined. It just leaves you feeling like, oh man, that was a really, really intense thing. And one of these days I want to talk about the thematic messages of this movie and why I connect to it in ways beyond it being just a impeccably crafted movie. But that's a story. That's a spoiler discussion, and I don't want to have that here. But on the other end of the spectrum, I've been binge watching ER on Hulu with my wife, who grew up watching ER and has the show built into her DNA. And I never did. It's brand new to me. And I'm surprised by how good it is. I know that later seasons apparently get soapier, and I'm not looking forward to that. But at least season one, late season one where I am now, it's a really good show, really good characters. I appreciate how each episode is a series of short stories that are all thematically connected, sort of a early prototype of the Mad Men model. And I like the show when it's at the hospital. I like it a little less when it leaves the hospital. But I'm addicted. I like watching ER, and I'm probably going to commit to watching all 13 seasons, is it? And all 300-something episodes. But that was my weekend. Hereditary, ER, and cat poop.
That is pretty insane. Well, Brad isn't the only person who saw Ocean's 8. HT also saw the movie. HT, what did you think?
I was entertained by it. I will say that I agree with a lot of the criticisms that Brad had, in that there was a real distinct lack of conflict, and the style too that Soderbergh brought to the first three Oceans films was missing as well. I don't think Gary Ross really has that visual eye or that kineticism that Soderbergh has, which is unfortunate because it wastes such a talented cast. And that's where I'm going to disagree with Brad in that I think there was a lot of chemistry with the cast. I really enjoyed just seeing Sandra Bullock and Cate Blanchett banter and walk around New York in billowing, beautiful coats the entire time, even though they were kind of carbon copies of the character types of George Clooney and Brad Pitt's characters. I enjoyed it, and I think that even though everyone else got very little screen time, they did get to shine through a bit, especially Anne Hathaway, who was amazing in this film. I don't think we were talking enough about how good Anne Hathaway is in this and how funny and enjoyable she is in this sort of self-satirical role in which she pokes fun at, like, her own image. And I like that a lot of people are realizing now that Anne Hathaway did not deserve all that hate that she got for the past, like, few years unnecessarily. I still am really unsure why everyone started hating on her just because she tries hard. It's ridiculous, and I'm glad that people are finally realizing how good and funny she is in this film. So yeah, Ocean's 8 was it was definitely just like a very junk food cinema for me. Something that you can watch and enjoy, but kind of forget after a little bit, but still like have some fun takeaways. Like Anne Hathaway is great, and I want to buy all of Cate Blanchett's tailored suits.
And you also saw Hereditary?
Yeah, it was a big 180 for me the next day. I watched
how can you like read a trilogy of books and go out and see two movies? I couldn't even see these movies.
So I didn't go outside other than to go to these movies. I had plans to see Ocean's 8, so I had to go to do that. And then Hereditary, I also made plans to do that on Saturday. But then the rest of the weekend, I was just like staying inside my room and reading these books. And it was pretty bad, actually. I probably should not have done that. But it was rainy for a lot of the weekend, so it was okay. But yes, Hereditary. I really enjoyed it. And I definitely... Is it a spoiler to say that it's about grief? Because I want to...
No, that's not a spoiler. That's fine.
Okay. I really like how it becomes... it's at first portrayed as a tale about grief. It's like this sort of familial horror film. But I was really unfortunate in that I saw it with an audience that was not along for the ride. I think my audience was definitely in the theater for a more traditional horror film. So I could feel them sort of getting restless for the first half of the film, which was really good and really moody and tense, but a different kind of tension than you get in a regular horror film. It was more about the character-driven tension that we have from the sort of grief plot. And when we have those final scenes that Jacob was talking about, no one was reacting as much as I was. So I was very upset about that because I really enjoyed the film. But I feel like if I had a better audience to watch it with, it would have been even more enjoyable for me. I did get nightmares from it for a while. I've been staying up late reading my books. I've been like going to bed at like 3 a.m. and being like, wow, it's really scary right now.
I did mention that this film has like a really low cinema score. What was it, like D- or something?
It was D+.
D+. And a lot of people have been asking on Twitter, what is the point of cinema scores if people are actually liking, critics are actually liking this movie? So I thought we'd bring this up really quick right here. That Jacob, what is the point of a cinema score?
Oh God, I feel like it's an antiquated concept. It comes from polling audiences outside of theaters in Los Angeles to get a mainstream consensus on a wide release movie, and I'm honestly, I'll cop to it. I'm not too sure how the information is useful or why it's used or how anybody accepts it because it's just a handful of LA theaters. I mean, who cares?
Well, I agree there in the low sample rate, but I do think that it has a purpose, but not in a purpose of like, what do people think of this movie? I think the cinema score tells us more of what people were expecting versus what they got. And it's mainly used for marketing. So it's, like with a film that is marketed in a way that might be deceiving, might get a lower cinema score. Does that make sense? And it actually occurs to me that A24 has had a lot. This is an A24 movie, right?
Yes.
They've had a lot of low cinema score. So are they releasing are they marketing movies to the mainstream that the mainstream doesn't want to see?
Oh, 100%.
They're trying to trick the mainstream into seeing these artsy indie kind of movies.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much because HT's working on an article about this, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her thoughts on it. But A24 has released some of the best horror movies of the century so far, but almost all of them have had like knee-jerk reactions from mainstream audiences because they were sold as being something traditional when they're definitely not.
For sure. Chris, what have you been watching?
I watched the first 4 episodes of Hulu's new Stephen King series, Castle Rock, and I can't tell you anything about it because I'm embargoed, but I just wanted to brag that I watched it. So there's that.
Well, I'll jump in real quick and say I have not spoken to Chris about this, but I've heard from other people who remain anonymous who have seen it. That's very good. So,
I cannot comment one way or the other, but I did watch it. I also watched A Wrinkle in Time, the recent Disney movie on Blu-ray, and I really did not like it. And I wish I did. I wanted to like it because I like everyone involved with this movie, and I thought it looked interesting. But I hate to say it, but this is a bad movie. It's just really poorly put together, and everyone in it is kind of bad, even though they're all generally good actors. None of them really do that good of a job here, and I'm really not sure what happened. It's like it's like this weird fluke where supremely talented people all got together and somehow made a bad movie. I'm almost like fascinated to read like a behind the scenes look at how this movie came together just to try and figure out what went wrong, because this should have worked. The concept is good. Everyone involved with it is good, and it just doesn't work. And I can't even really pinpoint what is wrong with it exactly. It just felt wrong watching it. Like it felt like, I don't know. It felt like a first draft. Like I was watching someone's early idea that didn't get hammered out. They didn't hammer out all the kinks, something like that.
Yeah, it's almost ambitiously bad in a way, and I kind of appreciate that like it's not just like half-assed. It's just like a lot of interesting but wrong decisions.
Yeah, like it has like it's a movie that has like the best intentions, and so like I can't say like I hated it because its heart is in the right place, but nothing works, and it's almost impressive how badly everything plays out.
Okay, let's move on to what we've been eating. I guess I'll start this off of what I've not been eating. And that is, I order a lot from Postmates, which is a food delivery service, kind of like Uber for food. And you order stuff and they deliver it. A couple times last week, I ordered food on Postmates. I'm wondering if this has happened to any of you. I got a notification on my phone, your food is arriving. Notification a minute later, your food has been delivered. And I was like, I haven't gotten my food. And, I call, I contacted the tech support, and they gave me a code, they refunded my order and stuff like that. But I kind of think that now people with this surge of people using Postmates, especially in Los Angeles, that I wonder if like people are like walking down the street, and then when the Postmates driver pulls up and says, "Are you Peter?" they're just like, "Yes," and then they take the food. Do you know what I mean? Because you could tell that someone delivering something, and they're just going to give it to the person. Like, have any of you had this experience of ordering with Postmates or Uber Eats and it being delivered, but not to you?
Not with Postmates, but once a drunk guy tried to get into my Uber.
I think it's one of the benefits of living in a house, in my case, is that it's very hard for me to intercept my food because I have the house number, then they knock on my door and I answer it. But I feel like living in Los Angeles, where you're living in a condo or an apartment, and things are a lot more dense, and people are like wandering around your outside of your home at all times. It's a lot more of a threat.
And there's like no parking anywhere, so I think like the Postmates driver probably doesn't want to try to find parking, so they like flag down the nearest person that they think could possibly be the person they're delivering to. But I don't know. I thought it was worth mentioning. And I just want to bring up IHOP has renamed themselves the International House of Burgers. What is going on here, guys? This sounds like a horrible rename. Like, is this a joke?
I mean, I know when I would go to IHOP, the first thing I would ask is, what are your burger specials? Because that's just what I like to do, is go to an International House of Pancakes and get what they're not known for.
According to my social media, according to people that apparently know more than me, it's a temporary renaming, but IHOP's hiding the part that it's temporary. I guess it's just part of their plan to try to say, we're not just breakfast, we also serve hamburgers. But my whole thing is, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of chains that serve good burgers that people like and enjoy. IHOP is a breakfast place, and people like it and enjoy the breakfast place. I feel like they're trying to enter a market where there's no room for them and nobody cares. Nobody cares about an IHOP burger. Nobody will, even with a special like this.
I'm not going to lie. As somebody who thoroughly enjoys cheeseburgers and always tries cheeseburgers as often as I can at various restaurants and things like that, because every cheeseburger is different, I will go to IHOP and I will try one of these burgers and see if they're doing it right. But otherwise, yeah, like, I mean, it's definitely, a stunt that's getting them a lot of attention, but more so they're just being...
But is it negative attention?
Yeah, well, that's the thing I was going to say, is they're being mocked for it more than anything. Like, even the sassy Wendy's Twitter account is replying to people saying, yeah, we're not really worried about a place that couldn't get pancakes right the first time.
And if it's a temporary thing to bring attention, it just seems like they're going to get, like, negative feedback both ways, because then people are just going to think that, they, changed it back because of all the negative social media and publicity they got from the rename. But, let's move on. Brad, what have you been eating?
Oh, I'm always trying new things. And there's a new kind of Milky Way out that's Milky Way Fudge. Where they replaced the usual sort of nougaty filling with a fudge filling to pair with the caramel, and it's pretty good actually. I actually think that I might prefer it over the regular Milky Way, and so as far as I know, I think that it might only be available in minis right now. But there was a time when there was like a bigger bar that was available, and I saw at a gas station once. So yeah, it's a nice variation on that. Old standby. And then Lipton has been putting out these new half and half flavors. I really like Arnold Palmer's, the big Arizona tea cans that are iced tea and lemonade. And I've noticed that Lipton has been doing a lot more as far as varying the flavors of theirs in bottles. And so recently I saw a strawberry melon one, and then I also saw an iced tea and watermelon lemonade flavor as well. And they're really good. They're definitely very sweet, but I really enjoy the different flavors of lemonade that there are out there, from especially now that the summer is getting heating up, and I'm getting thirsty a lot more and don't always necessarily want to water. So yeah, they're pretty good. I've spotted them at like a bunch of different gas stations, so if you're out and about, keep an eye out for them.
I've been eating mostly my usual diet of junk food and nonsense. And as somebody who enjoys junk food and nonsense, I find myself consistently let down by the Cheesecake Factory, which is a place I go to maybe once every few months thinking,
I love the Cheesecake Factory.
I'm gonna find something delicious here in this oversized menu, in this gaudy, over-decorated location. I'm gonna find something amazing and delicious and bad for me that I love. And every time I go there, I feel let down by it. Peter, what do you like on the menu there?
My favorite thing on the Cheesecake Factory menu is actually an appetizer called the Buffalo Blast. Have you had that?
That's what I ordered last night, Peter, and I was so disappointed.
Really? Maybe they cooked them badly in Austin, Texas. Maybe,
or maybe the Cheesecake Factory just doesn't realize that I want some buffalo in my Buffalo Blast. Like, you tear apart one of those little buffalo pack. What it is, it's a deep fried pocket stuffed with buffalo chicken and stuff. And I say and stuff because I don't know what else is in it. I have no idea. And you whip it open, there's like maybe like a teaspoon of actual chicken inside a massive deep fried crust. And I love my deep fried crust, but this is not the best deep fried crust I've ever had. So
this sounds like they may have made it bad at your Cheesecake Factory, because I've had Buffalo Blast many times, and usually it's filled with buffalo chicken inside.
I think the mistake you guys are making is getting food at Cheesecake Factory. Just get cheesecake and go home.
I do. That's what I usually do. I usually call in and go pick up cheesecake from me and my wife. I take it home and watch movies and eat cheesecake. But sometimes it's right next to a bookstore I always shop at. So sometimes I'm just walking by and I go, you know what? Maybe this time. Maybe this is the time. and I need to stop doing that.
Okay, so what was the other horrible thing you had at Cheesecake Factory?
God, I've never had a good thing there. Like, I've had burgers and sandwiches and just everything over the years. I feel like every time it comes up, I go like, oh, this is like almost food? Look, I'm a guy who likes Chili's. I like Chili's and TGI Fridays. I like my chain junk. I like my bullshit. But for some reason, I will eat an entire plate of Chili's Southwestern egg rolls, but you put Cheesecake Factory in front of me, I just feel sad.
This is making me depressed because I really enjoyed Cheesecake Factory, and it's one of those things I hate to admit because everybody kind of like looks down on chain restaurants here. But yeah, I don't know. Let's move on to what we've been playing. Jacob, what have you been playing?
Well, not quite playing, but a game that I've been trying to finish. Netrunner, Android Netrunner. It's a game published by Fantasy Flight Games, and it's coming to an end. I guess a fast version of explaining what Netrunner is. It's a cyberpunk-themed science fiction card game for 2 players, and it's asymmetrical, where one player is the hacker trying to break into the database of a evil Blade Runner-esque corporation, and the other player is corporation. They have to put up defenses and try to keep the runner out of their system and kill them or destroy their finances. And it's the best card game I've ever played. Thematically, mechanically, it is sound, it is tight, it is amazing. And it's a living card game, which is Fantasy Flight Games' name for
stealing money from your wallet.
Yeah, but it's not like Magic. Where Magic, you have to go buy a booster pack for $4, open it, and you get random cards. You have to spend hundreds of dollars to find what you want. A living card game, there's a new card pack of 60 cards every month. You spend $15. You know what you're getting. You can choose to skip it. It's all out there. It's all open information, and you can just spend as little or as much as you want. And I've been a very casual player. I've competed. I haven't built decks competitively, although I do follow the tournament scene to see what's going on. And what ended up happening is Wizards of the Coast, who owns the game design for Netrunner, they own the core mechanics, whereas Fantasy Flight owns the Android universe in which the game is set. The deal to renew that license came up and will not be renewed. And the press release from Fantasy Flight suggested they were surprised by this. They had just put out a new revised core box set of the main game. They had planned a new expansion for October. So clearly, Wizards of the Coast has plans for Netrunner design, and Fantasy Flight was, despite this being one of their most successful games, this was totally caught off guard. So I pulled up my Netrunner cards. I found out that casually collecting, I was missing a certain number of decks, certain number of card packs. So I spent the weekend running out the game stores, picking up ones I didn't have, reorganizing my cards, and now looking at everything of the, God, how many card packs are there? There are, looking at I have my charts open right now, so I can tell you.
This is a game that requires you to have charts of.
There are 48 card packs, or small card packs, in addition to the big box expansions, and I only need 10 left to complete the collection. So I'll be looking for those over the next few months, picking them up, and hopefully people don't try to jack up the price just because it's going out of print in October. So we'll see. It's a great game. I'm looking forward to being a complete game. When I have all the cards and the game stops evolving, I can have friends over and say, hey, let's all build decks. We have the entire game here. Let's do it. As opposed to, hey, if we're going to play this, we need to stay up to date at all times, which is really hard for a lot of people to do. So I'm going to miss Netrunner. I feel bad for everybody who played competitively, but I'm looking forward to being complete and finished and having it all on my shelf and ready to actually be played more casually.
This is also interesting because Asmodee, the company that owns Fantasy Flight Games, I had heard through the rumblings that they were trying to get a Netrunner movie made in Hollywood. So I'm not sure if this is going to affect things because they still own the Android universe. They just don't own the Netrunner game, which is a little bit confusing. But anyways, let's move on to Brad, and he's always playing not games but music. So what music have you been playing this week, Brad?
Yeah, the soundtrack for Hearts Beat Loud, the indie gem from Sundance starring Nick Offerman and Kiersey Clemens, came out last Friday, since the movie is now playing in limited theaters across the country and will be expanding into other theaters as the weeks progress. And if you haven't got a chance to listen to the soundtrack yet, or if you've seen the movie and you have the songs stuck in your head like I did afterwards, the whole soundtrack is available on Spotify and Apple Music and all that jazz, all the places you can buy and stream music. And so I've been listening to the original songs from that soundtrack. All songs that are performed by Nick Offerman and Kiersey Clemens with music by Keegan DeWitt, which is pretty fantastic.
Very cool. That does it for today's edition of Slash Film Daily. You can find all of our work on slashfilm.com. You can find Slash Film Daily published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and television and deeper dives into the great features from slashfilm.com. You can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your questions, comments, concerns to peter@slashfilm.com. I thank everybody for all the good words on our discussion of toxic fandom. It seems like you guys really dug that episode. Please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word. We'll see you tomorrow.